Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, yet again, we have another night of live Facebook lectures with scholars of South Ilahi. Tonight, we are very blessed and we're very happy to have Shaykh Ebrahim Schuitema again for another conversation with him, inshallah. But before that, I'll just read out his quick biography, right? So tonight's topic is Unleash Our Potential Being in Ramadan, right? Shaykh Ebrahim Schuitema is the founder and leading partner of Schuitema Associates, a business and personal transformation consultancy based in South Africa with franchises in Pakistan. He is a murid of Sheikh Mustafa Bashir from Morocco of the Tariqah Shazali, and now he continues the spiritual work of his Sheikh. And with that, we'd like to invite Shaykh Ebrahim on the screen. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Wa alaikum assalam, Shaykh. How are you, Shaykh?
Nice to be back. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. It's very nice to see you again, Sheikh, after a while.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, Sheikh. How's everything over there at Johannesburg?
Well, I don't know. I'm locked up. So, but it's now beginning to bite, Abu Sufyan. I mean, it's there's there's more and more people are destitute. This wasn't a wealthy country to start off with. So food security is now an issue. There's the people suffering extreme poverty, and there's real hunger. So now the question is, what's going to get you first, hunger or the virus? So it's quite extreme. There's been an increasing call here at the Zawiya for food. People asking for food parcels. So we'll see, inshallah.
Inshallah, may Allah make it easy for everyone.
Ameen.
I'm sure. Yes, Sheikh. Tonight's topic is Unleash the Potential Being in the month of Ramadan. As everyone probably is very familiar with, the month of Ramadan is a lot of them spend time with their family. They fast. They also abstain from anything that is not just haram, but also not good for them spiritually. However, beyond this scope of fasting, abstaining from food and drink, beyond this scope of all these physical acts of fasting, what would you say is the spiritual objective of the month of Ramadan, Sheikh?
Abu Sufyan, I mean, I think Ramadan is a fantastic opportunity to kind of pursue our transformation, enable our transformation and our growth. I think one can contrast growth and transformation with stagnation. If you aren't growing, you're stagnating. And it helps to kind of unpack what's the difference between those two. And really, the difference is concerned with how your intent operates in the moment. I mean, in a sense, you have to refract the issue of stagnation down to the instance. I mean, if you're growing, then it's something that's happening over time. It means, there's one moment you're higher, you're different, you're better than the previous moment. So if one wants to sort of really dissect growth, you need to understand how transcendence and growth happens in the instant, in the moment. And that really has to do with one's intent. I mean, we've discussed this before, but if you deal with the other on the basis of what you want from the other defines you. In other words, in that situation, you'll stagnate because you're defined. Yes. Like the situation that you're in becomes bigger than you. When you act on the basis of what Allah wants from you in that situation, in other words, on what you can contribute, you're now acting for a reason that's bigger than yourself. And in that situation, you transcend your own boundaries and you grow. So every time you act on the basis of what Allah wants from you, you change, you transform. Every time you act on the basis of what you want to get, you stagnate. That's kind of like the basic sort of formula of growth.
MashaAllah.
Now, clearly acting on the basis of what Allah wants from you, or acting on the basis of what the situation requires of you, in the first instance has to mean patience, because it means you are able to suspend your own agenda, the thing that you want. You can forego that. You can forego the gratification of what you want to act on the basis of what He wants. And so in the first instance, that this, Ramadan and the Sawm really emphasizes that kind of, quite dramatically, because that's exactly what you do. You suspend what you want to act on the basis of what Allah wants. You forego what's in your interest. In fact, Allah says to us that, the two reasons why we fast is to learn patience and to become compassionate, or to learn compassion. And that's the patience sits behind all moral action. It's it's the key variable that enables you to forego what it is that you want. And fasting clearly does that on an ongoing basis.
Would you say, Shaykh, you mentioned about patience, the importance of having patience in this month of Ramadan. Would you say that patience is a form of virtue? And would you say that Ramadan is also about cultivating virtues such as patience?
Well, yes. In fact, you see, patience is so. Why do we suspend our agenda? Why do we forego what we want to get? Because how else can our Rabb demonstrate to us that He has better in store for us than what we can have for ourselves? The purpose of suspending your agenda is to allow the place that you can get to with your life, this really ascended place, which will be the cumulative effect of many instances of personal transformation, acting on the basis of something bigger than you. The engine that allows it to happen is that you forego what you want. You forego your own interests. You forego your satisfaction. You delay your gratification, in a sense. And also, I mean, it's when Allah describes virtue in Quran, He very often combines these two qualities, amanu wa amalu salihat, and they kind of mutually enabling things. Now, amalu salihat is the just action. It is doing the thing that is required of you in the situation that you're in. And so a key variable in that is patience. But what patience also requires of you is a stepping back from the situation. I mean, if I'm intensely concerned with getting an outcome, then it's almost as if I'm sort of trying to climb into the world to get the thing that I want. That when I'm patient, when I forego the outcome, it enables an inner event. And it enables a pulling back from the situation so that I can see things as they are. How can my Rabb demonstrate to me that what He's put in front of me is better than what I could want for myself? If I don't forego the one thing I'm trying to go for, if I don't step back, if I don't learn to see a bigger picture. So in a sense, what the patience element of doing the right thing, because Amalu Salihat means you do the right thing, it means you do what He wants. That requires you to forego it. It requires patience. That enables another possibility. And that possibility is a stepping back, going back into yourself, an inward gatheredness that enables you to see things as they are. These two elements of seeing things as they are and giving each situation its due, amalu salihat, these things are mutually enabling.
Inshallah.
I mean, when I forego my interest and I pull, that allows me to pull back so I can see the thing as it is. When I see the thing as it is, I then, by definition, am not just looking at the situation on the basis of my presumption. I'm looking at, so it's easier for me to see what Allah wants from me in that situation rather than my own interest and I can do the right thing. So another way of translating this is that seeing things as they are and giving each situation its due are two hands that wash each other. And this seeing things as they are is really what amanu is about. It's what believing is about. Now that's going to take a little sort of exploration. So if you'll be patient with me, will you?
Inshallah, Bismillah, Shaykh. We have time.
So I'd like you to consider. So these are the two root conditions, you know, and fasting forces us to exercise those two root conditions. Because of the patience, you foregoing what you want, and then the patience forces you not to intervene, to step back and to see things as they are. So the patience has that dual effect. You see things as they are, and it enables you to give the situation its due. So these are the two sandals. So if we say, what is this path about? In any situation that you're in, you've got to act on the basis of what he wants. Well, that requires of you to see the situation as it is first. Otherwise, you're not going to recognize what he wants. What's very important is that he wants, what he wants from you is not always sweetness and light. You know, because otherwise he wouldn't have enjoined us to command what is right and forbid what is wrong. A person who's commanding what's right and forbidding what is wrong isn't always negotiable. You know, I mean, you know, at some point you're going to cross a line and they're going to bare their teeth at you. So this is not acceptable. You know, they command it. I don't do that very well, but they command it right there. So what does this thing about being here to give actually mean? So acting, you know, what does the situation want of me? There's a complexity to this. The situation doesn't always just want sweetness and kindness from you. In fact, there are two broad categories that are concerned with giving.
Okay.
There's a hungry child at your door. He's 8 years old. He hasn't eaten in a week. He knocks at the door. You open the door and this child asks you, Uncle, I haven't eaten in a week. Can I please have some food? Surely the appropriate thing would be to give the child food.
Yes.
So giving in that situation means to give the child food.
Yes.
You're walking down, they let you out the cage, you see, and you're walking down the road and you see some madman being attacked by a little old lady because he wants to take her handbag. So the question is, what does giving mean in this instance? And clearly in this instance, giving would mean that you would assault this thug and protect the little old lady. As you would, I can see you would. You're a very nice young man. You've been fantastic. So now if you look at these two, kind of bits of drama from a purely behavioral point of view, Abu Sufyan,
yes,
you have a contradiction. Because in the first instance, when the child was standing in front of you, you were the sweetest, kindest man on the planet. You invited him in, you put him down, you gave him food. You asked him, you know, where do you live? Whatever, you were sweet and kind. The thug in the street, though, you were brute. But that's exactly the point. Giving isn't always about being sweet and kind. Giving is about being appropriate. Sometimes it is sweet. Sometimes it is being a brute. In other words, giving is not about being nice. It's about being appropriate. It's about acting consistently with either the generosity or the courage that's operative in the situation that you're in.
Mashallah.
Clearly, when you're giving food to the child, you're being generous. When you're taking on the thug, you're being courageous. Right. So this thing of giving, I mean, the reason why seeing things as they are is really important is because giving is nuanced. It presents you with this problem that, you know, what is the appropriate thing? Is it the confrontation or the accommodation? What's the appropriate thing? You know? Now, and if you don't get that thing right, if you don't see the thing as it is so you can get it right, you can you can actually get it wrong. I mean, so in other words, taking is about getting your logic wrong. It's about acting in a situation that requires generosity in a so-called courageous way and vice versa. So make it practical. You're at home and there's a knock at the door. You open the door, same story. The child's there. He hasn't eaten in a week. It's tragic.
Yes.
Uncle, I'm very hungry, please. Just a little bit of bread, please. And you smack this child. And we're horrified. So Abu Sufyan, why did you smack
What
the
is
child?
going
And
on?
you say, no, I'm being courageous.
Mm.
That's not courage. That's called selfishness. You're walking down the road. The little old lady's being beaten by the thug. You run over, you grab the bag out of the old woman's hands and you give it to the thug. And we're completely confused. So Abu Sufyan, how'd you compute this? You say, no, I'm being generous. Do you understand? That if the situation requires generosity and you act in a so-called courageous way, you're not giving, you're taking. Huh? We call that selfishness. If the situation requires courage and you act in a so-called generous way, you're not giving, you're taking, you call that cowardice.
Would you say that to be able to determine what is the right action at that point in time, whether you use courage or generosity, it requires experience and wisdom? Would you say that? And how does one get to a point where they can actually act on that wisdom?
You see, one must be very careful how you see that word, experience and wisdom, because it means like I've been around, I've seen a lot, and I might have seen so much, convince myself that I've seen enough to be cynical. So I'm a really old codger, and I've lived in the city. I live near Johannesburg, for heaven's sake. Kid knocks at my door. I'm telling you, his uncle's around the corner casing my joint as I open the door. I will smack him. Do you understand? We can always justify. So there's an element which goes beyond learning. This is why book learning is not useful in this matter. I mean, text can only get you so far. You need a polished heart. You need the ability not to be informed by your experience of the past, but to pull back from the situation, patience, sabr, pull back from this so that you're not overwhelmed by the situation, so you can see the thing as it is. So we said that the inner equivalent of giving each situation its due is this quality of seeing things as they are. Now, if we say giving each situation its due has these two elements, generosity and courage, and we say that giving each situation its due is rooted in seeing things as they are, it has to mean that there's got to be an equivalent there's got to be an inner equivalent to generosity, and there has to be an inner equivalent to courage.
Yes.
The inner equivalent of generosity is called gratitude. Because when I'm generous, I've given to give away. I mean, if I've given something to you with the intention to develop a feeling of obligation, that's not giving, that's an investment.
Yes.
So if I'm giving to give away. What makes it possible for me to give away is that I recognize I've received in excess of my due. I mean, if you give me something and I think you owe that thing, I don't owe you any gratitude. So gratitude is the recognition that I've received in excess of my due. And it's precisely seeing that I've received in excess of my due that it's easy for me to give away. In other words, gratitude enables generosity. And just like gratitude enables generosity, generosity reciprocally enables gratitude. Why? I beg your pardon. Because let's assume I haven't learned this truth about generosity. So whenever I give, I'm making an investment, you see. I mean, so, whenever I do. Now, and now one day you come to me and you quite, with an open heart, give me something quite generously. If my habit is that I only give out of an investment, what am I going to assume about your motive?
You have some ulterior motives, or
exactly.
You have an agenda.
And therefore, I'm not going to be grateful. I'm going to think we're busy playing chess here. You've got one over me. Do you know what I mean? So,
yes.
So my lack of generosity disables my ability to recognize your generosity, which disables my gratitude. My gratitude enables my generosity enables my gratitude. So there's an inner equivalent to being able to act generously, and that's gratitude. They're mutually enabling things, just like seeing things as they are enables giving each situation its due. So gratitude enables generosity, and generosity enables gratitude.
Inshallah.
There has to be also an inner equivalent to trust. Big about to courage. And that inner equivalent is trust.
Trust.
And by the way, did you know that in many languages of the world, the word belief and the word trust are the same word?
Interesting.
When you believe, you trust. I believe you, I trust you. I mean, in Zulu, it's the same word. Ugutemba means to believe and to trust. It's the same word. So why is the inner equivalent of courage trust? Well, the easiest way to do this is to do a little mind experiment. So a thought experiment. So I blindfold you. Right. And I'm standing in front of you and I say to Abu Sufyan, fall. You say, you're nuts, I'm going to hurt myself. I say, no, trust me, I'll catch you. So you hesitate. I say, I catch you. And finally, you have the courage and you take this brave step of falling. And I do indeed catch you. And I put you back in your feet. You see, you've now, he can catch me. He's caught me. You have a little bit of trust. I said, you fall again. It's easy for you to fall the second time because I'll catch you again. This falling is a courageous thing. And it's precisely the fact that you fell and got caught that enables you to earn trust. Trust enables courage, and courage enables trust. When I act courageously, yes, carry on.
How about the situation where, because you mentioned about courage and trust, right? I guess sometimes, in this framework, I think a lot of people don't have that trust is because their trust has been, or how to put it, they put their trust on someone and it didn't work out, or rather they felt betrayed, right? So is there a degradation of that kind of trust, and how does someone build on that?
Yes. This is exactly why you cannot trust your experience, you see, because we do the same with experience as we do with the news. You know, what gets published? The rapes, murders, and muggings, or the little old lady being given a cup of tea by her neighbor? Small acts of random kindness just aren't memorable. And in fact, small acts of random kindness are the reality of the world.
Indeed.
And that's why don't trust your experience, because what are you going to remember? It's not the 100 times things went right, it's the 1 time things went wrong. And you're going to let that inform your behavior. In fact, when you're acting on the basis of this kind of experience, you aren't acting on the basis of seeing things as they are. You're acting on the basis of presumption. So that's very useful, actually. That's very helpful, because it means to say that we can now formulate a rule that will help us to understand when you're not seeing things as they are. If we now have seeing things as they are and giving each situation its due are the sort of the root categories here.
Yes.
Standing on top of these root categories are 4 other categories: generosity and courage, and gratitude and trust. And they're all kind of mutually enabling. Now, of those 4 categories, actually, the most important one of the 4 is gratitude. Why? Because if I'm grateful, then it's easy for me to give. If I'm grateful, I will look at the future with trust. I mean, when you look at the future with distrust, it's exactly what you're saying. You're saying something's happened to me that I'm resentful about. Right.
Yes.
So what's also important then is that gratitude and generosity and trust and courage have a different deportment in terms of time.
Interesting.
Because when you are grateful, surely you're looking at the past. Something has happened, thank you. When you are generous, it's in a sense you're giving away what you've accumulated. So generosity and gratitude are elements that are aimed at the past. Their deportment is towards the past.
Inshallah.
Trust is looking forward. As the enemy comes over the hill, courage is about not running away. As the enemy comes, they both look. So trust and courage look forward. The deportment is ahead of time. Generosity and gratitude look backward. Now, that means to say, and it has to mean, if giving each situation its due means being generous and courageous, seeing things as they are has to mean that you're looking at your past with deep gratitude and you're looking at your future with trust. Which means to say that if you aren't looking at your past with gratitude, you are doing violence to the truth. So that's why you can't just rely on information. You've got to rely on learning how to witness the thing beyond your own expectation, because what you have to understand is precisely this truth that for every one thing that's gone wrong, 100 things are right.
Inshallah.
You know, what did we say? If we say the heart of this thing is gratitude, gratitude means that you have received in excess of your due. I mean, how can that not be true? I mean, so we say, I don't trust people. That's why I'm not going to take risks into the future ever again. You know, 50 control mechanisms, don't allow them through the door, you know. Now, if we just look at how it is that you got to be here, you know, what it is that you owe other people. So you are wearing a fabric, woven fabric, eh? You are, eh? That's looks very nice, actually. Okay, so I mean, let's just do Abu Sufyan, if you don't mind, a short lecture on the history of the shirt which you're wearing. It has a very interesting history, short history. It's actually actually the history is very long. Do you know that thing started 10,000 years ago? Because 10,000 years ago, some really clever people discovered that you could take plant yarn, or rather plant fiber, and spin it into yarn. It took another 2,000 years and lots of clever people to do a lot of thinking about this, to work out that you can take that fiber and weave it into fabric. It then took some much more clever people over a long period of time to discover, I mean, in fact, these very clever English engineers, the people that we like to be so cynical about, you know, the 17th century, discovered the mechanical engineering and the fine metallurgy to produce these amazing machines that could, you know, automatically produce woven fabric clothing that's put a shirt on every back of every, how many billion? 7, 8 billion of us now.
8 billion, yeah.
Do any of us pay a cent royalty to all the people who've collaborated over the millennia just to put the shirt on your back?
No, we don't.
So how can you turn around and look at the social other, at other people, and say you cannot trust them? When you've been the recipient of immeasurable blessings of people. I mean, and consider what we have in our modern life. I mean, just the collaboration of human effort that has taken place over millennia to have produced the life. You could never repay that. Just the individual effort that it's taken many people to produce you. I mean, there's an African proverb that says, "It takes a village to raise a child." You are the product of an collaborative effort by other people. Who the hell are you to be cynical of them, to say you cannot trust them? You understand? So any person who's learned a lesson from life that says you cannot trust them has taken the one datum point of harm and has built a resentful narrative around that, and has therefore poisoned their life by doing that. Which basically means to say that where selfishness is the inverse of generosity, resentment is the inverse of gratitude. While you are feeling resentful with regard to anything at all, you are not seeing the thing as in fact, you're being a kafir. The essence of kufr is resentment. Because the inverse, the opposite of gratitude is resentment. And Allah says, ingratitude is resentment, is kufr. I mean, kufr is defined, is translated as ingratitude. Ingratitude means I've not been given enough. I'm resentful.
Yes.
So
it reminds me of one of the podcasts I was hearing today. It spoke about the parent of virtues, parent of all virtues. I find it quite interesting. And you mentioned the parent of all virtues is actually gratitude. And I feel that whatever that you mentioned, even you mentioned about the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. It reminds me of another African proverb which says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And I want to link it back to the topic of Ramadan, because sometimes we feel like Ramadan is just me, my ibadah, how much Quran I have read, how many rak'at I've done. But there's this element of the collective where, there is this jama'ah, there's this thinking about others, there's charity, there's giving, there's zakat. Maybe could you expound a little bit on how the collective is important in the month of Ramadan? And
well, so it's good you bring us back to, because one can get lost in the desert with this stuff. I mean, it's
a vast
it's
desert.
so interesting.
Yeah, it is, mashallah.
But it's good you bring us back to the topic, because so we said, you remember when we started talking, we said, why does Allah want us to fast? Well, He did tell us. He said He wants you to learn patience, and He wants you to learn compassion. Now, it is the word compassion means to feel with. Am I right? Compassion. So compassion means to feel with, means to find myself in your shoes, means to find my humanness, my suffering, my disease in you, and vice versa. I see we are the same. I'm compassionate. The opposite of compassion, I suppose, would be to see people as not the same as you, and usable objects that can be manipulated to your end. So, how does compassion and patience actually build iman? It's kind of like a shorthand way of because compassion and patience is why we're fasting. How does that build iman? Well, it is when you, so we've already agreed that patience is about forgoing, and that brings this whole complexity, which actually is rooted in gratitude, and that then makes it is. I learn patience. I learn gratitude by fasting, by learning patience, and that's what But it puts me in a place where I can stop seeing people as objects for my use. I start finding myself in others. And when I find myself in others, that's when I recognize how stupendously I've been the recipient of their generosity to me.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, so true.
It's because as then start. So these people that have kind of gifted me, whatever it is, what did it take from? Well, there was this ingenuity, and suddenly realized, hold on, this was a person like me, and because this is a person like me, I have to at least be grateful for what they've given me. It's not this isn't just a resource in my environment that I've gone and plucked. I haven't plucked a shirt. There isn't a shirt tree out there. I got it from somebody, and that person got it from other people. So this is huge collaboration. They all were people like me. So it's that sense of compassion which allows me to find myself in the other, which allows me to recognize how immensely I am the recipient of the generosity of the other. So you see, this thing is, we have this sense about compassion. You see that it's this kind of when I'm being compassionate, it's like I'm from a strong place, and I'm looking down at you, the object of my compassion. You know what I mean? That's not what compassion does to you. Compassion does exactly the opposite to you. Compassion means I find myself in you. You are not below me. I'm not the one dispensing my magnanimity. I'm compassionate. I find my suffering in you and your suffering in me. So, I mean, there's this treasure trove, Abu Sufyan, of blessing and that is implicit in Ramadan. That really invites us to exercise the very best, the very highest of our own beings.
MashaAllah.
And it's such a blessing to have this. I mean, it's like all of it. If we see the whole deen as a technology for transcendence, we take every one of the elements and we unpack it. We start to see the genius that is in this technology. This is so much more than just kind of learning a different cultural identity, or it's not that at all. It's really about transcending yourself, becoming bigger than who you think you are.
Subhanallah. I think that's amazing. Actually, whatever that you mentioned, Shaykh, reminded me of this poetry by the Persian poet Hafiz. He said that he said, even after all this while, right, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look at what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. And I think that kind of giving that you are mentioning about, to me, is something. It seems like this lofty thing, like this, to nurture yourself in month of Ramadan. What does it take? How do you get to that level of giving where you don't see yourself anymore? You don't expect. You don't. There's no expectation of wanting something in return.
Right. So. You remember when we started our conversation, we said in order to understand, I mean, the outcome of growth is obviously this ascended place that you're describing, this kind of, but mercifully, growth is process. And process means increment. I mean, it's true, nobody's born 21 years old with a leather jacket and teeth. I mean, it takes you 21 years to get there. It's a process.
Yes.
And if we said it's process, it's moment by moment. And if you unpack the moment, what is this architecture of the moment? Well, it's this wrestle for correctness that we're describing. So you don't have to become the great, magnanimous, saintly sort of, angelic being that walks on the waters, and no, that's not necessary. Do what your Rabb wants of you now, in the situation that he presents you with now, to the best of your ability. Struggle with your resentment, transcend your resentment, learn how to transmute resentment into gratitude so that you can start seeing things as they are. Just do that moment by moment by moment, and he will deliver you to that ascended place. That's not your problem. That's his problem. In fact, it's not his problem, it's his promise.
MashaAllah.
He's promised you the garden. He's promised you the most extraordinary, incalculable, ecstatic vista. He's not asking for you to do that thing. He's already done it. Do right now. Leave your pettiness, leave your resentment, do what I want of you, and I'm going to make it easy for you, he says. He says, yeah, I've given you a couple of tools. One's called Ramadan. Yeah, use it.
MashaAllah. Or whatever you shared is very beautiful, and I think it relates a lot about spirituality, and also it kind of shifts the paradigm that people have of giving, where you give and you're expecting something, and therefore you have some resentment because why is it that the person does not reciprocate, right? Or you also mentioned about giving but seeing the other in you, so that you don't come from this high position looking down on someone.
Yes, that's right.
And also in Ramadan, you have a lot of initiatives where you're giving charity, and people will be like, why is this person taking photos of himself giving food or supplies to others? Is that quote unquote arrogant, or not giving from a very selfless place? Yeah. So I feel it's really interesting. But Shay, I wanted to ask on this topic of the freedom of worship, because whatever that you mentioned, to me it seems that it's all about letting go of, or rather, uh, it's not being attached to anything. It's rather detachment. And freedom, this idea of freedom, could you expound a little bit of what it means to be a slave but yet free in worshipping Allah, especially in this month of Ramadan?
When you make yourself his slave, I mean, you've heard this. When you make yourself his slave, you've got the world under your heel. When you forget him and try and dominate, get stuff from the world, you are under the world's heel. And it comes back to that rule that we described right at the beginning. When you deal with the situation on the basis of what you want, you are the prisoner of the situation. It defines you. You are under the control of other than you. When you act on the basis of what he wants, you make yourself a slave to him. You shift your intent from what you can get from other than you. They lose their hold over you and you're free. I mean, clearly, the most free human being is the person who is quite willing to forego, leave, or lose absolutely everything, including their life, in an instant. How do you manipulate that person? How do you get that person into a corner? How do you control that person? You cannot. That person is free. Yeah. They're not free because they're a slave to themselves. They're free because they're a slave to their Rabb. In any situation, they'll only do what their understanding is what he wants of them. So that means to say that learning that fasting is in fact is like, it's like a gymnasium for freedom.
Interesting.
Because one of those basic things we want from the world, please, obviously, is food and water. And what, let's kind of start off with, never mind get your shoes or your watch. I mean, like, feed me, please. Start off there. If you can forego that, that's really beginning to dismantle the effect that the other has on you, the control the other has on you. That is, Ramadan is a gymnasium for freedom.
Inshallah. That's very beautifully said, Sheikh. Ramadan is the gymnasium of freedom. I've never heard it said that way before. MashaAllah. Sheikh, if Ramadan is the gymnasium for freedom, I guess sometimes we will also need a coach, right? You need a coach. You can't just like go into the gym and then just start lifting weights, like it's too heavy for you. Would you say that let's put it into perspective for those listeners, anyone who's in any position right now, be it you're a working professional, you're a parent, juggling with kids, and you were trying to manage the fact that you want to be free, you want to be a better slave, but you still have many kids. So for all these kind of social contexts, it might sound a little bit theoretical, but how do we make it more practical for a lot of us to approach whatever that you're mentioning?
So you mentioned the idea of coach. In other words, somebody that you can use as an advisor. I think it's very important to have. So that's what Schuitema is for. That's what Tasawwuf is about. I mean, if Tasawwuf isn't about that, if Tasawwuf isn't about enabling people's freedom, then I've completely misunderstood, and they should send me back to grade zero.
Inshallah.
Yeah. This is, and so it does give you a couple of rules to bear in mind when you are looking for a teacher. you know. So the first thing is you have to understand that this person can actually do very little for you. This, you know, the giant that you are is already inside you, and the love affair between you and Allah is the thing that's going to unlock that giant. So this person's role has to be minimalistic. You cannot view them as catalytic. That's dangerous, you know. It is your story and your relationship with Allah that is that issue.
Yes.
The second thing about this is that, you know, the sort of single-minded connection to a single teacher. I mean, that's just not how life works. I mean, you know, the person who taught you in grade school is not the same person that taught you at university. I mean, this is not, you know, there is a sense of appropriacy to where we're at in our lives. And you need to give yourself, it's a very heretical view, I know. And I mean, I'm probably going to get some hate mail after this, but I think you should allow yourself to move when you need to move. You be serious about your own path, and use a sheikh as a coach, not as a magician.
Not as a magician.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that they do that's going to poof and you're going to be better. You know, I mean, it's not about sherbet and turbans and magic. It is about, first of all, do you resonate with how the person views this project of being alive, and you know, and are you willing to, on occasion, just kind of stand next to them and kind of get a little bit of an input? But your journey is your problem. It's not your sheikh's problem. A fundamental problem with what's happened to Tasawwuf is that people have abrogated responsibility for their own journey to the sheikh. You know, that, yeah, and, you know, now I've given bay'ah, and I'm, you know, it's now all going to happen. I do bay'ah and I do the right amount of dhikr, and then it's all done. No, it's not all done.
Thank you, Sheikh, for that. I think it's very interesting you mentioned about that. I wanted to scope it to another point, if you're okay with that.
Please.
Inshallah. I mean, the book that you wrote, the Millennium Discourses, I think has a lot of very beautiful gems inside. One of the chapters you wrote about was, if you know yourself, you know your Lord. And this idea of die before you die. Could you expound on how this idea of knowing yourself, being serious about tasawwuf, tazkiyah, is related to how we can improve and unleash our potential in the month of Ramadan?
So, you see that, I mean, the reason why I'm hesitating is that I'm assuming we're kind of running towards time here. And you've asked something which you're not going to do justice to in a day's conversation. So I'm going to do I'm going to do a hatchet job. All right. If you have to understand that there's a deep, not even a paradoxical, there's a contradictory significance in that statement. Know yourself and know your Lord. Because it depends which aspect that you identify with yourself or you're talking about. Now, first of all, there's you, Abu Sufyan from Singapore, who's had a history and has an identity, even has a gender, has all of the stuff that you would normally consider yourself to be. This collection of ideas of who you are, that's your nafs, that's your persona, that's who you've identified yourself to be. He's exactly the opposite of that. Every one of the things that go on to constructing this idea of who you are is a statement of limitation. It's you know, if you say your name is Abu Sufyan, it means, I mean, you know how many possible names you're discounting, disabling. So when you say you're Abu Sufyan, you're saying infinitely more about what you're not than about what you are. So any single thing you can say about yourself is a statement of exclusion, actually. It's a statement of limitation. So you're this web of limitations. He's the limitless. So in terms of the patterning of who you think you are, your identity, your persona, your nafs,
Yes.
that he's the exact opposite of that. Where you are small, he is vast. Where you are needy, clearly, because as a human being, as soon as you're limited, then that means you're inadequate. That means you're needy. Where you're needy, he's self-fulfilled. Where you are vulnerable, he's unassailable. Where you are small, so he's the exact, like a daguerreotype. I mean, I don't know if the daguerreotype is a kind of photographic process that they had in the 19th century, where all that you had was an outline. It was like a profile. He's the exact opposite. Where you're the dark, he's the light. Mm. So that's one way of seeing, know yourself and you'll know your Rabb. In other words, know who you really are, this petty little bundle of resentments and suspicions and distrust, and you know that your Rabb is the exact opposite of that. Mm. Mm. But if he's closer to you than your jugular vein, that means that the inside of your inside, in other words, the thing that you really are, the thing that's looking through all of this at the world, is none other than him. So if you really know who you are, this vastness behind your eyes, you'll know him, because that is him. Because there's no difference between the one who's looking and him. So, you understand? This is like, which side of this are you looking at? So this statement contains within it a huge contradictory paradox. And it depends what part of you you're describing. Are you describing Abu Sufyan? Or are you describing this scintillating, vast aliveness that came into this world before your parents gave it a name and taught you to become Abu Sufyan?
Inshallah. Mm.
Now, let's relate this to Ramadan.
Yeah.
What Ramadan does is that Ramadan helps you to become inwardly gathered, because it forces the disconnection from the world. And we've already indicated at the beginning of our talk, inward gatheredness produces this aspect of seeing things as they are. It literally pulls you back into this quietness, this vastness that sits behind your eyes.
Yes.
And the best time in Ramadan is Tahajjud, when everything's quiet. And then you discover who you really are. And it's huge. It is beyond Abu Sufyan. It is like there's this vastness, this incalculable, black, velvety, spacious emptiness that sits behind you, which is his nature. That's where you come out of. That's who you are. And you can use this month as a tool to find that, rediscover that.
SubhanAllah. I think, Shaykh, whatever that you mentioned, you're right. It takes a lot. And then I think we can't do justice to whatever that we were talking for this one conversation. But I think it's very beautiful, whatever that you mentioned. And also you mentioned about the idea of doing what we can in the moment, and not some big goal out there, but actually, work on the resentment, work on being more grateful to Allah, right? And then inshallah, we'll cultivate a sense of generosity and trust, and having that courage. Thank you so much, Shaykh, for this very enlightening conversation as always.
Always a delight speaking to you, Abu Sufyan.
Alhamdulillah. I'm not sure would you like to have any concluding statements before we end the conversation? Or maybe a closing dua?
I mean, I'd like to pray that Allah blesses you and keeps you and grants you increase and really rewards your obvious sincerity and the whole group. Sidi Khalid, the ladies of Sautilahi, and by extension your families and your community. Bless you all.
Ameen. Thank you so much, Shaykh. We hope inshallah we can have more classes with you. May Allah grant you good health, long life, so that we can benefit from your teaching, Shaykh. Take care, Shaykh.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Bismillah.
Thank you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. We just had a very enlightening session as always with Shaykh Ebrahim, Schuitema, and Alhamdulillah tonight. We hope that it was beneficial for you. And also we have a few announcements before we end. Let me see. Hold on. All right. Okay. So tomorrow, Saturday, 2nd of May, we have conversations in Ramadan experience in the land of the Ottomans. Right. We have a conversation FB Live. This will be at 5 p.m. tomorrow, Singapore time, with Ustaz Nazilul Mubin, right? Do check that out. Our poster will be out. And also on Imam Mendao, and we have Imam Mendao at 10 p.m. tomorrow, right? Do check out our posters. Imam Abdul Anda will be speaking at 10 p.m. tomorrow, inshallah. And with that, thank you so much. Please pray for us and our volunteers, and of course our founders, Sidi Khalid and Kainun. May Allah bless all of you. Have a very good Ramadan, and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. Assalamu alaikum.